We've been discussing some topics that have been pretty interesting. I've been able to speak with some of you who have come back and ask some questions about it. And one of the things that sometimes happens is that a lot of the things that we're talking about are things that we should know before we get married or as we're getting ready to get married, but then we discover them later on. But it's good that at least we discover them later on, because as we get going in our marriage, we have the desire to make the best marriage that we can. In fact, one of the things that I have learned is that the people that go to marriage seminars are the ones who don't need to go. I think we all need to go, but the ones who go are the ones that need to go the least. Because the reason you're here is because you're worried about your marriage and you want to do it better. Okay? The ones that aren't here are people who really don't care. So a lot of times, the people who come to marriage seminars are usually doing pretty good already. But they just want to make it better just because just a desire, they have the interest to be here. To be here means that couple is willing to do whatever they have to do to make their marriage work. Because it is time. It is time that you take. You could be home doing something else, but yet you care enough to make it better. Today, I guess the topic, after I saw the title that I gave this, I said, you know what, I could have did it a different topic, but sometimes you do something just to make it more interesting when I say who's the boss. And really, it has nothing to do with being a boss, but sometimes that's a phrase that we use. Who's the boss? Who's the one who leads out in the home? And that's probably a better subject for us tonight, is who is the one who leads out? And I'm going to be frank with you. Who is, the thing why I said who is the one that leads out is because I believe that everything that you do with another person, someone has to lead. Okay? You cannot have everybody lead. No one is really in charge. We all do it together. When you hear that, that means nothing's going to happen. Okay, nothing's going to happen. I don't care where you go, what you work in. I don't care if the minute you have more than one person doing something, one person has to take the lead. Okay, that's just natural. Okay, you get in a car, and you have you have space for 10 people in the car, but guess what? Only one person can drive. A car doesn't come with 5 steering wheels. It only comes with one. And have you ever been in the car when one person wants to go one place and the other person wants to go somewhere else? What do you have? A big argument in the car. Right? You have a bad time. You're not having any fun. But when one person clearly knows where they want to go, and the other people say, okay, I trust you, I think you know where you're going, and let's go, you're going to see a lot of happiness in there. As I was thinking about this seminar, the picture that came to my mind was as a child when we left our country of origin, Cuba. My father could see where socialism was going. Remember, communism is never presented as communism, is always presented as socialism. No country has ever accepted communism. Socialism is picked by the people, and then communism is imposed by the government. So my father saw where this was going. And as he saw where this was going, my father said, we need to leave. Okay? No one in my family saw that. My uncles, my aunts, my grandparents, no one saw it, but my father was able to see that. Now, he made papers to leave, and for 8 years, he was followed. He was put in prison. They took everything we had away from us. They did all these things, and everybody in our family was like, are you crazy? Why are you doing this? Why are you willing to go through this, to get your family out of here? Because they all kept their cars. They had their stuff. We were the only ones going. My father was the only one going to prison. We were the only one taking our stuff away. And I remember that when finally 8 years later, we got our papers to leave the country. I remember my mother telling my father, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving my family. And my father said, we're leaving. I didn't go through all this hell to back out now. I remember as a child, my mother fighting the whole time, those 3 or 4 days before we left, crying and all these things. And my father was on firm ground. We are leaving. And I remember leaving my grandparents' house, my mother's parents, leaving the house. And I remember that picture, me sitting in the back seat of a car, my cousin's car, and my mother turning back and starting screaming and crying, because back then when you left Cuba, you left to never see your family again. Okay? Our goodbye was, we will see you in heaven. Okay? That's what it was. So it was to never return. But because of my father's firmness, later on things got worse, and our whole family that's here, that is, as you know, is a lot of people, are here because of him coming over, and then my mother, little by little, able to help her family come over. In a marriage, in a home, no matter what happens, someone must lead. Someone must be willing to be responsible for what happens. Someone must be willing to say, I'll take the load. I'm going to be the one who's going to carry it, and this is the way we're going to go. And I'm willing to pay the price for it. But you see, leadership has a price. And in leadership, you have to be willing to be wrong and pay the price for being wrong. One of the things that when we talk about, and I'll be straight up with you, and I'll show you some verses where I think I accept what the Bible says, that the man is supposed to be biblically the leader of the home and the priest of the home. And I believe that God has given us that responsibility to be that. 1 Corinthians 11:3, but I want you to know that the head of every man is what? Christ. The head of the head of the woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. And I believe that the Bible is clearly tells us, that Christ is the head of the church, that Christ is the head of the man, and that the man is the head of the household. Okay? And it tells us that clearly, and the issue is that sometimes when we hear that, we forget that the example of the leadership of the man in the home is given by the example of Jesus with his church. And if a man wants to lead, he must lead in the same way that Jesus leads The church. Okay? One of the problems that happens is, and I'll give you an example of this. When you talk to someone about the Sabbath, okay, the person will say, you know, the Sabbath should not be obeyed. And the example that they give is the Pharisees, how the Pharisees kept the Sabbath. So therefore, since the Pharisees did this, this, and that, then we shouldn't keep the Sabbath, because look what the Pharisees did. Well, you're using the wrong example to say, well, we shouldn't keep the Sabbath, because the Pharisees weren't keeping the Sabbath according to the Bible. They were keeping the Sabbath according to their own rules that they made up. Okay? So we can't use the arguments of Jesus with the Pharisees about the Sabbath. And the same reason when we talk about the man being, the head of the household, some people will take that and use the abuse that men have had in leadership to say that that's not true. No, you can't. You can't do that. You need to go to see what is God asking of men and how they ought to lead in their home. When you read Ephesians 5:22-20, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is head of the wife, and also Christ is head of the church. And not in one instance in the Bible, every time it is crucial that every time that it talks as the man as the head of the household, it always talks about just like Christ. Just like Christ. In other words, that in the leadership that we as men take on, we should always do it with the Spirit of Christ. The Spirit of Christ. We cannot say, there's been a lot of men who abuse that. There are a lot of men who abuse. That's not what the Bible is talking about. It's not what the Bible is talking about at all. So just, I wanted to just express, what was my point that I see in this, and we will continue to talk about this. The abuse of these verses by men who haven't submitted to Christ will see these verses as a machismo or something that's wrong, but will base, but they're basing their premise, their position on wrong premises. If you grow up in a supposedly Christian home where the father uses that verse to abuse their wife and to abuse their children, then you're going to see that as a problem. But when you grow up in a home where the father uses that verse to be a servant leader, when he uses that verse to lead his wife and his children in spiritual things, when he uses that verse to see himself as responsible for the spirituality of the home, you will see that verse in a whole complete different picture. The home I grew up in, we all knew who the leader was. It was clear, had a clear definition of who the leader was. We all knew that my father was responsible for my mother and for the rest of the family. We all knew that. Yet, I never saw my father abuse my mother. I never saw him abuse the children. But we knew, clearly, we knew who was leading the home. We all knew the one responsible for the finances of the home was, my father. We all knew that he was willing to die for us if he had to. It doesn't mean that my mother would not be willing to, but somehow we knew that if it came to that point, he would be the one to step up to do that. The problem is when we use abusive leadership to knock down all leadership. Nothing runs without leadership. Nothing. A home doesn't run without leadership. A church doesn't run without leadership. A job doesn't run without leadership. A company doesn't run without leadership. We must know, it must clearly be known who that leader is. But now, if we've had the wrong example of leadership, then what we do is knock all leadership. You can't do that. We all knew and expected him to defend us. There was no question about it. We knew that my mother would also, but we understood. We understood his role. The problem is that we have a lot of broken men that we're asking to lead. And we live in a society where it's not only broken men, it's broken women. I'm just staying on the subject of men this time. Because of the premises that I believe. That the man is the person responsible and the leader of the home. But the problem that we have is like a car. It's supposed to take you to point A to point B. But when the car is broken, how can I do it? And the problem that we have today in society, and I'm one that will take that, and I'm a man myself, blame us as men as we can take most of the blame why society is where it is today. Because I see where a lot of us men are not stepping up to the role that we have. We don't want to take the responsibility of leading. When you, as a child, were abused by your father, or the mother abused by the father, you will see the leadership in the home by a man as a problem instead of the solution. Because, like we were said at the beginning, we all are a result of what we have lived. We all are a result of what we have experienced. And you're going to have whatever you feel, whichever way you think, has been made by things that you have seen. And the same thing is with me. One of the problems that we see when this happens, have you heard the phrase, say a woman says she's the one who wears the pants in the house? You hear that a lot. And in fact, and it's a fact that a lot of women wear pants, right? But do you see a man wearing skirts? Men don't like to wear skirts, right? But yet women wear pants. And let me tell you what happens. When a woman has to take the leadership role in the home, the man won't take the mother's role in the home. Usually when the woman has to take the husband's role in the home, the man takes no role at all. And the woman has to take the whole role. At least if it was, okay, honey, I'm going to lead this home, but can you please cook and clean the house, or do this or do that, or do the stuff that maybe I'm supposed to be doing? Men don't want to do that. Usually, when the woman has to take the leadership in the home, she has to end up taking the whole thing. There isn't an exchange. Okay? There isn't an exchange. They usually have to take the whole thing. When you look at it, one of the one of the things that has convinced me more of this is that one of the major issues that I see that women have come to me about is that, say, Pastor, my husband doesn't take a leadership role. I have to do everything. And when you talk to them, and if you talk to 10 women, 8 out of 10 want a strong man who takes responsibility and is willing to lead. If you ask 8 out of 10, the idea that women say, no, I don't want anybody telling me what to do, or I want to do what I want. I want to do this. You don't find that women's lib is a lie. Most women don't even believe in that. Most women still want a man that opens the door for her. Most women still want a man who's willing to take that responsibility in the home. Hey, that if there is a financial problem, he is willing to say, I will take care of that. And I will make it happen. Women still want to feel protected by her husband. They still want to feel protected. They still want to know that they have a man with them who's going to protect her and her children no matter what happens. They still want to know that they're married to a man that if somehow the rent is coming short that month, he's going to find it. The buck's going to stop with him. Just like when couples are going out, a woman likes to be courted, doesn't she? A woman wants to be conquered. Okay? A woman wants, the man to try to win her over. The woman wants to see that the man is doing something to win her over. And that is, it doesn't mean every single woman is like that, but in generally, that's the way it is. That in general, we all still play a role just because we are a man or just because we are a woman. There are certain things that we want. But the problem is that we don't know, a lot of times as men, don't know how to lead. And they think that if I say, you should be the leader, that I'm saying, nobody has a right to give an opinion. And everybody has to do what you say. And they confuse that leadership. That's the leadership that maybe some men have given. That's the leadership that maybe some men have given. Maybe that's the leadership that they've seen in the home. But a leader leads a process. Just because I feel that I'm responsible for my home, for my wife, and for my children, doesn't mean that if we're going to paint the house, that I say, hey, we're going to paint this yellow and that's it. As a leader, you bring the process to your family. You bring the process to your wife. It doesn't mean you're going to paint it your color, but you lead your home into the process. And you're probably going to end up painting it whatever your wife wants you to paint it. But as a leader, you lead a process to come out with the best decision possible. And that's not just in that is just another way. Because you are a leader, it doesn't mean that what you want is what gets done. As a leader, you lead the home in a proper and fair way for everybody, where everyone has a voice. But you lead that process out. As a leader, you can see the end product. As a leader, as a man of the home, as the father, as a husband, you're going to stay up at night. You're going to wake up early and you're going to pray. You know why? Because there's a lot of times that you're not going to know what to do. But still, you carry the load on your shoulders. You feel the load on your shoulders. A lot of times, I grow very impatient with guys who don't care what's going on with your kids. They don't care if they're in debt. They're like, ho-hum, it doesn't matter. They're very passive, very calm. And you see their wives, pulling their hairs out, trying to make ends meet. And while they're very calm, cool, and collective about it, because, somehow they know that their wife is going to come up with the money somehow. And they don't feel that responsibility. And women who have to go through that, believe me, they're not happy. They're not happy. They want to see their husband step up to the plate. They want to see that. But men, as I tell you that, it is not a reason to abuse, to scream. Do you know why people scream? Because they've lost control. That's why they scream, because they've lost control. You know why you get loud in a conversation? Because you've lost control. So you think you're going to scare people by talking loud. But you don't need to do that. Jesus isn't like that. Jesus was the leader of his apostles. But did he ever put them down? Did he ever make them feel uncomfortable? In fact, he was constantly trying to bring them up. A leader loves the people he leads. A man loves his wife. And a man will have a servant style of leadership towards his wife. He will have a servant style of leadership towards his wife. The best husband leaders serve their wives. The best husband leaders see that if their wife needs something, they will go out and get it. You know why? Because they see themselves as the one responsible for their wives. They see themselves as the one responsible for that. A man who is a leader in the house is constantly looking, what are the needs? But let me tell you something. When wives have to be constantly reminding their husbands, hey, when are you going to take out the trash? When are you going to paint that wall? When are you going to do this? When you going to do that? When and the procrastination is there. And the women have to, hey, are you going to fix that or what? Hey, do I have to get Joe from the job to come over and get it done? Do I have to talk to the neighbor so that he'll come and get it done? Now, wouldn't you as a man feel embarrassed when you know that there's something supposed to be done in your home, and all of a sudden you get home one day at 5 o'clock and Joe from next door is at your house working on it?
Joe came through.
All of a sudden you're like, I'm your husband. Why didn't you tell me about it? And she'd be like, I told you 10 times. But somehow they don't see themselves, in that role. Because to them, they're like, hey, you can paint it, right? But leadership in the home by a man, he looks at himself as the one responsible, not the one to abuse, not the one to make their wife feel less. In fact, a man who's a leader in his home lifts their wives. It makes them feel good about themselves. And recognizes their wives' gifts and abilities. And he leads her. He doesn't only lead the home, he leads her into greatness. He leads her into doing things that she had never done before. Do you see where I'm coming from in leading? He looks at the needs of his wives. He sees what he can do for her. He sees the needs of his children. He sees 10 years away from now, and he's able to lead the process. I want you to stick that in your head, that we don't demand, we don't say this thing has to be done this way because I said it. No, we are smart enough to lead our family in a correct process to do the best for who? For the whole family. A lot of times we might not know what we want. A lot of times we may not know what we want. But we're able to present it in the right way, where maybe nobody else wants to talk about it. Since we see ourselves as the leaders, we present it to the family, we present it to our wives. And a lot of times, like one of the things that I've said to you, that as me and my wife have grown older, I've come to admire how smart she is more and more. And I've learned to listen to her more and more. Because I listen to her opinion, because I respect her opinion, it doesn't mean that, that's it, I've lost my leadership. I painted the house yellow like she said, and I've lost my leadership. No. As a pastor here in the church, there's a lot of things that I say, hey, we should do this way. And somebody else comes and says, Pastor, I think we should do it this way. And I say, okay, let's do it that way. I don't go home pouting because all of a sudden I don't feel I'm the leader anymore. Someone always has to lead the process to come to the right point, to come to the right decision. A leader gets excited about the progress of those he leads. A leader gets excited when their wife is accomplishing their dream. A leader, as a husband leader, you will look at your wife, you will look at your children, and you will see what will make them happy. You say, could we do this? If we did this, would that make you happy? And as a husband leader, sometimes you're going to do things that maybe your wife might not even be she doesn't really want to say it to you. But you're able to see it because your heart is to make her happy. Your heart is to make her feel like the most powerful woman in this world. See, a true leader in a home will never make their wives feel like they're obedient or under them. If the kind of leadership that you're thinking, that I'm talking about, is the kind of leadership who humiliates a woman, you're 100% wrong. My kind of leadership, in my kind of leadership that I'm talking about, is the kind of leadership that leads a woman to being whatever she's ever wanted to accomplish and greater. I think the biblical leadership that the Bible talks about the man should be is an example of what Jesus does, is to lead people into joy and happiness and enjoying life like never before. And somebody has to take that leadership. Somebody has to take that. The thing is, and it's the biggest complaint. Guys, it's the biggest complaint, the number one complaint that I get from women. It's the number one complaint. That they feel they have no one to defend them. They feel like although they're married, they feel they're alone. They feel they have no one to defend them, no one who is willing to step up, no one who's willing to say the buck stops with me. I will make it happen. A leader is not interested in doing what he wants. He's interested in doing what's the best for the family or for his wife. I have never seen a woman who doesn't want to follow a man who leads under the biblical concept of leadership. Never. I have never seen a woman who says, I don't want that kind of man. I have never seen a woman who said, I don't want that man that gets up and prays for his family. I don't want that kind of man who sees himself as financially responsible and to protect his family, and who sees himself in that leadership role. I don't want that kind of man. I have never seen a woman do that. Now, when men take that leadership and abuse it, everybody should be against that. Everyone should be against that. But the true biblical leadership as a husband, you will make your wife feel like a queen. You will make your wife happy to be your wife. She will see how God uses you. A leadership has a plan when no one else does. Has a plan when no one else does. As a leader, sometimes when people come up and say, well, what should we do? if you're leading, you need to come up with a plan. A leader has a plan when no one else does. And believe me, in the home, you're going to run into that. And hopefully as men, we see ourselves as saying, you know what, I need to be there. You know, and maybe you're going to come up and you're going to start leading the process, and your wife is going to come up with a better plan than you do. And that's okay. And that's okay. But someone has to feel that responsibility to make something happen. A leader would rather be wrong about the action he takes rather than to take no action at all. A lot of times we just have to do something. And from doing something, things ramificate from there. But as we see ourselves as men in the home, we need to see that responsibility. And I believe it's a God-given responsibility to lead the spirituality of our home, to making our wives and children feel secure in the home. I'm talking about financial security. I'm talking about protection. I'm talking about marriage security. I see that as our responsibility as men to carry that out. And I think it's a God-given responsibility for us to carry that out. If you've seen the wrong example of leadership in the home, don't use that as a reason to not step up into your leadership calling. Don't use that. Sometimes when I've talked about this, people start saying, yeah, but I seen this man, he used to beat up. We're not talking about that. No, because I seen this guy, man, he used to be yelling. That's not even part of the conversation. No, because I've seen men who treat their... That's not even part of the conversation. We're talking about Christian servant leadership. What should that be? And it's something that the more I've dealt with this, the more I have felt that sometimes we need to talk to just men about that kind of leadership. Why? Because it's being seen less and less. And like I said, women wear pants, but men don't like to wear skirts. And when the woman has to take on that responsibility, see, that responsibility is something that no one can see. They don't see it. It's psychological. It's in them that they feel they have to take that on because they say, I can't depend on this guy. I can't depend on him. I got to take this on. And when women have to take that on, they still have to continue with their motherly and wives roles. Because when women have to be the one they're the ones worried if their child is out at 2 o'clock in the morning. The guy's not worried. He goes to bed at 10 o'clock. He don't care. And when she feels she has to be the one making the phone calls and finding out where the kids are, and she's got to be making sure the insurance got paid, and she needs to be making sure the rent's going to get paid, and she needs to be working, and she needs to be doing all this kind of stuff, then the guy's going to go to bed, at 10 o'clock at night, and he wants his wife, to go to bed with him, to make love. Because he still holds her responsible for her wifely duties. And women are able. Women are amazing. And believe me, they have been able to wear the pants. But the problem is that when they've had to do that, the guys don't want to wear the skirts. And then the women have to take on the whole. It's not that they exchange roles. She has to end up taking both. I believe that this is something that we as men must see ourselves responsible every day for the spirituality of our wives, the spirituality of our children, the spirituality of our homes. We must see ourselves as responsible for the safety of our wives, for the safety of our children. We must see ourselves responsible for the finances of our home. It doesn't mean that both don't work, but you carry that load on your shoulders on making sure that everything comes through and that everything is fine. When we take on that role, that kind of biblical leadership, there is no woman that will ever be against that. None. You will not find a woman who will ever be against the spiritual leadership or the biblical leadership that I've talked to you about here tonight. You can be against it, but I can tell you no woman will be against it. And what drives me to this, just the practicality, is more and more, this is what I'm telling you today is a repetition of what women are constantly wanting and desiring from their husbands. So let's be the husband that our wives want us to be. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much, Lord, for your blessings. We thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here today. The opportunity, Lord, to just follow your example in leadership. Following your example in loving our families. Following your example in serving our families. Following your example in treating our wives the way you treat the church. Give us wisdom and understanding for that, Lord. We ask all this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen.